Welcome to the Bonafide Leaders podcast with your host, Tim G. Williams. Let's get to it. Tim G. Williams, welcome to another episode of the Bonafide Leaders podcast. And today we are going to talk about commitment. So last episode, I made the mistake of asking why this is important to you at the very end. So tell me, why commitment? Why is that so important to you? Personally, maybe, and then why is that the topic today? And then what is that? What is the importance for leaders in general? What's the big takeaway here?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think I know commitment is critical for leaders to understand, how committed the people are within the organization, on the team. And it's equally important for the folks on the team to understand, from a leader's perspective, how committed do I need to be to this? How important is that? So part of what I love for us to unpack today is giving leaders some tools to help them be able to identify what level, we'll talk about levels of commitment, different folks on the team are on, and then helping those employees to be able to see the potential benefits that might mirror the level of commitment that one is making. And so that's part of what I hope we can unpack a little bit today. I've got maybe an illustration that might kick this thing off a little bit. You may be familiar with the old chicken and the pig story. So there's a story that goes like this. It says the chicken and the pig one day found themselves near a grocery store. And the chicken and the pig looked up at the grocery store and they saw a sign in the window. And the window said, "Bacon and eggs, desperately needed." Chicken looks at the pig looks at the chicken looks at the pig, and pig looks at the chicken. Chicken says, "You know what, let's help this grocer out. Tell you what, you provide the bacon and I'll provide the eggs." To which the pig said, "You crazy." To which the chicken said, "What is the problem?" To which the pig replied, "You are making a contribution. And you're asking me to give the whole thing." And this, I think, really underscores the various levels of commitment that we'll talk about here today. Level one, I'll call it, level one is no commitment. And as leaders, sometimes this can fool us. You don't recognize that people are not committed, but level one is not commitment, not committed. Level two is committed with a mark in between, which says I'm committed until something else better or sweeter comes around, a nice shiny object, if you will. Level three says I'm committed and I'm in it to win it. So long as most of the elements that we started with are in place, whether that be the vision, whether that be the people, I'm in it to really win this thing. And then level four commitment that leaders are looking for is what I call the ride or die commitment. This says, I am with you and I will not leave until we complete the mission. And completing the mission means success or its eventual failure. We just don't get it done. But just know that I'm with you. I got your back, ride or die. And as leaders, sometimes we confuse ourselves and folks confuse us because we don't exactly know which is which. We think, well, if they're on the payroll, they're committed because we think people are like us. And not everybody's there for the same reason or motivation that we might be in a particular role or job or assignment. And, this is where you had that new term that came up, probably right around 2021, quiet quitting, where people, just kind of left, just threw the deuces, as they say, ghosted their employers. They were present on the payroll, but really not there at all. And so leaders, we have to just be aware that there's 4 levels of commitment. There's chicken level, which is like 1, 2, which says, hey, I'll contribute, I'll get some eggs. And then there's level 4, where the pig says, I'll give everything. And we've just got to be able to discern and ascertain the difference.
Okay, I want to nuance that a little bit and ask, there are 2 related kind of questions. One is, does your heart have to be in something to be a committed person? And what I mean by that is, maybe I'm really good at my job and I work hard and I do a good job and people around me would say that I do a good job. My boss would think I do a good job.
Yeah.
But I don't really care about it. I'm just doing my job. That's how I get paid,
Yeah.
There's that, and then there's also uh, the idea of like work-life balance or integration, like we've talked about
Yep.
before. I, am I a ride or die person if I don't want to work 100-hour a week? You know what I mean? Like help me like tease that out a little bit.
Yeah. That's a great question. And there are situational circumstances that could cause a person to be in various levels. And I think it's really, really important for us as leaders to recognize, what are we asking of people? Um, if we're asking people to give level 4 ride or die commitment, but we're sort of only willing to give level 2, what does that say about us? And so, situationally, I think there's a couple things for us to consider. One of the questions that I think people ask themselves really just inherently, without really even thinking, it's just an automatic thought. The automatic thought is when they're asked to give a commitment, thought is this required or is this optional? Right? That's a question that people naturally ask themselves. Another question that people will often ask themselves when they're asked to give a commitment is, what's in it for me? Self-preservation. And naturally, I think we can think as leaders, boy, that's a selfish question. All right, be real with yourself for a minute. Don't you ask the same question? Sure, I think most, if not all of us do, even though maybe not overtly, but we're wondering, what is the potential benefit? What's the upside for me to go and commit myself to this thing? Third question people ask is, how much does it cost? Time, energy. What's my commute going to be like? What am I going to have to give up in my personal life to go and commit to this thing? Money. Am I going to have to not get a pay raise for 3 years in order to get that thing that I want? So those are some of the questions that people ask. And then I think the more strategic questions that we as leaders have to be aware that people are asking themselves is, how important is this? Is this a global deal? Is this a national level impact? Is this a community level impact? Is this specific just to my product line? Is it short-lived? Is this thing going to be so important for the next week, but then 5 weeks from now, no one's going to think about it? These are really important questions that leaders have to be aware that individuals are asking themselves all the time. And then maybe a last question that, again, is a little bit more strategic and hopefully from the more mature person is, what difference will my involvement make in this? So when you go through that set of questions, knowing that people are going to ask those questions of you internally, as leaders, we've got to be prepared to go and address that and make sure that the commitment level that we're asking for matches what we're providing in return. Does that job or this assignment or this opportunity, does it inspire people to want to go and give a level 3 or level 4 type of commitment?
I'm reading this book right now. I'm listening to it called Slow Productivity by Cal Newport.
Okay.
He's a New Yorker writer. I think he's got a PhD from MIT in computer science, like very accomplished guy. And he's got a lot of books about work and all of that, but he encourages quiet quitting in some ways because he thinks that the demands of a lot of employers is too much. You got to do all this. You got to work 100-hour weeks. You got to respond to that PowerPoint at 2 a.m., all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so I'm curious, if you're a leader and you feel that you go through that list of questions, you think about the commitment you're asking, what you're doing for yourself, and you feel that your team justifiably needs to be a little bit more committed. What do you do at that moment? How do you encourage commitment or bring it out of people?
That's a great question. In my experience, I can only speak for myself and what I've observed in other people, what I've heard from people that inspires them. And to me, when you think about what keeps people committed, what gets them committed, it's probably 3 big ones. One is setting a compelling vision, a vision that describes a preferred future. Again, setting a compelling vision has to do with describing visually a preferred or desired future, something we don't have today that we desire for the future. That's first. Second is building high quality, mutually beneficial relationships. That is paramount. In fact, one of the things that John Maxwell says is that sometimes people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. Now, that's not everybody. Some people actually buy into the vision. Hey, what is this? I'm excited about the project, the plan, the mission. And then they buy into the leader. And you've got a mix of people that you'll have on your team. But I would say building high trusting, authentic relationships is really, really important. And then the third is empowering people to use their skills and abilities. There's I'm going to give another reference to a book, The Leadership Challenge. I can't pronounce the last name of the two writers. One starts with a K, the other I don't remember. Yellow book, but it's called The Leadership Challenge. And in it, along with Strength Finders, which most people are familiar with at this point, it said that people, when they're engaged in doing things that they're really, really great at, they're 6 times more productive and 6 times more likely to be engaged is what I meant to say. And they're 3 times more likely to report an overall excellent quality of life when they're working on things they're excited about, they're passionate about, and they're really, really good at. So those 3 things are important if you want to be able to create a lasting level of commitment in people. Is setting a compelling vision, a preferred future. Number 2, building high quality, high trust relationship that's mutually beneficial, not just one-sided. And then 3rd, really investing and empowering people to go use their gifts and skills. Now, question you didn't ask me, but I've got to say it. How do you erode or lose commitment? Well, this happens when we blur the line between what's in it for me versus what's in the other person, and it becomes really a what's in it for me kind of a thing. And that often leads to what I call manipulative behaviors. And people over time pick up on manipulative behaviors because they see that, you know what, things seem to working out for you, but I'm not receiving a reciprocal benefit that you keep getting, even though I keep doing all this stuff and you're asking me to just stay later and come in earlier and et cetera, et cetera. And so if you want to erode long-term commitment, just be a manipulator. And we've all worked with and seen people who really are out for themselves at the end of the day. They don't ever tell you that, kind of like a snake in a garden, right? They don't tell you they're about to attack you. You just know that all of a sudden you're bit. And this is how manipulation works. And leaders, we have to be careful with that. Obviously, we have agendas, we have goals, we have objectives we're trying to achieve. And at the same time, we've got to do the best we can to make it so that it's somewhat mutually beneficial. Otherwise, eventually that commitment, it will wane in people.
I like how you distinguish that some people are committed to the vision and some to the leader, some both.
Yeah.
But I like how the starting points may be different for different people. I really like that. It's helpful. And the last point that you're making made me think of self-determination theory, which is a psychological meta-analysis that basically says that there's autonomy, relatedness, relationships, and competence or mastery are the 3 components that make somebody engaged in their work and feel excited about it and committed to it. And so I think that makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
That fits. Yeah, that fits really, really well.
Let's say you're not a leader, but you're a leader, but you're not thinking about being committed to something above you, but you don't feel super committed just as a person. How do you have any, like, I don't know, quick tips or things that you've seen in your life that, like, this is, you just need to sort of discipline yourself, or how can you, like, grow in your commitment as a person?
Yeah. So let's maybe address this to we'll call them the emerging leader. Maybe you're a high potential, maybe you're still relatively early in career. One of the situations that would come up fairly regularly at my company is people who are early in career and they're looking around a lot. And we had a rotational program, and this happened a lot in the rotational program and then the few years after the rotational program. What happens in the rotational program is different for everybody. Everybody gets a different assignment, gets a different path, is assigned a different mentor, has a different supervisor, works in a different function. However, when you come out, you're out. And now what happens? What do you do with your career? But one thing that people would often talk about is the fact that, I just don't know what my career path is, and I'm concerned that I'm taking the wrong job. And I heard something, it wasn't my initial original advice, but I began to use it myself, which is that, at this point in your life, really don't worry about each individual job experience you have, particularly when you're still in your 20s, early 30s. Most of us are going to live and work for a really, really long time. And if we think about it with the end in mind, if I don't really stop working until I'm 65 or 70, how much does this job that I kind of hate in my 20s really matter in the grand scheme of things? What's going to be a lot more important is how well I've trained my brain to flexibly learn, to critically think, and to communicate. How well have I mastered that ability? And how well have I mastered my attitude and my ability to build resilience and work through things that are maybe uncomfortable or dissatisfying temporarily? And that's a skill that has to be built over time. There's a great book by Angela Duckworth called Grit, Grit, and it's pretty famous now, but at the time that I went to this conference, she had just released this book, and there's a grit scale inside of it, and she references the military academy up in New York. I think that's for the Army, West Point. And this test that all the cadets undergo, and they allowed her to basically bring in her grit scale as a test for these cadets. And it was a pretty good predictor of who was going to hang in there and do well at West Point and who didn't. And so it turns out that resilience is something we all can build. Some of us are blessed with a little bit more of it than others. However, it's a skill that absolutely can be built. And I think if we focus on the long term, beginning with the end in mind, as Covey said, then it helps our today position, because we realize that this job today, I may not love it, but I'm probably going to learn something from it. And I'm going to grow my communication skills and my critical thinking. And it's just one of probably 20 jobs that I'm going to have between now and the time I'm ultimately done working. And ideally, when it's all done, I can say, I've learned something. I've got something from each one.
I love that. That's such a good perspective. Think about learning, think about your skills, think about your resilience, your grit. Like, that's what you should be focused on. I love that. That's really helpful.
Yeah. And let's be honest.
Yeah.
Leaders, what are we looking for? We want people who are tough. One of the things that was encouraged frequently at my company was they want to find people who will go take the job that other people don't want to take. That's hard, that's tough, that's painful, but it's something the company really, really, really needs. I'll give an example. So early in the days of our automotive-based business, so we sell semiconductors that go into automotive applications. And at this particular time in the mid-early 2000s, 2004, 2005, 2006, no one wanted to touch that business with a 10-foot pole. And I didn't know much about the business. I just happened to kind of find myself there in that business unit. But we were the only business in all of analog in the company. And there's 20 or 30 other businesses in the company. We were the only one developing products for the automotive space. And anyone who knows anything about automotive customers know that they are exceptionally rigorous, we'll call it, in their approach to manage their supplier base. And delivery is very challenging. Quality standards are very high. Cost is a really, really big deal. And there's measurements that they have and hold. However, I think what really helped that business is we had leaders at the top of that business who were just committed people. I mean, these were level 3, level 4, ride or die kind of leaders who, through the face of customers yelling at them, requiring them to work all day and all night and constantly traveling back and forth to Japan or wherever the customer site was, or Germany, they just continued to persevere. And as a follower of that kind of a leader, it inspired me to kind of keep moving. Now, fast forward to 2015, 16, 17, I'm not sure when the change happened, but every business in analog now develops products for the automotive market. And I think commitment was a huge piece of why that transition happened, which was a great benefit for the company.
Interesting. I love that. Again, that perspective, that long term, what seems hard right now, that grit, that resilience, that'll carry you through 10 years from now, and you'll be the beacon. I love that.
Yeah. And leaders look for the kind of people who take on those assignments. And often those people, you wonder why they get bigger and better opportunities. Well, they showed a level of grit and commitment in the face of pain that was unlike what most people are willing to go do. And that does matter in the grand scheme of things.
That's a great segue to, you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of outcomes or benefits that come from being a committed person and having that kind of resilience, that grit. Can you describe a little bit about that? Just things that you've seen in your experience?
Yes. And I'll give you a quote I got from a leader. It's funny. He said this, now just thinking about his belief system and my belief system being the same, but he told me something, which was, push come to shove, Tim, we're going to go with, or it's better to go with, the devil you know than the devil you don't. And I asked him to explain that phrase to me a little bit. And he explained to me that meant that, look, when it comes down to promotions, when it comes down to who we're looking to really develop and invest in, we're going to invest and develop those people who we have relationships with. And we're only going to have relationships as senior leaders with people who probably attend some happy hours. They do stuff after work, maybe before work. They're in here a little bit earlier. Maybe they stay a little bit later. Those are the realities. I think on another podcast episode, we talked about, what's the minimum, to kind of be seen as maybe committed or, a work life that's reasonable. The truth is that there is an expectation that you got to go a little bit above and beyond to be seen and recognized. However, the benefits that accrue from that are great if that's something that you're motivated to do. If that's what you want for yourself, if that's aligned with your family and your values, that's certainly one of the benefits that can come, is the fact that you can be invested in, you can be developed, you can receive opportunities. And, it's not chicken level commitment that we're talking about. You're talking about pig level commitment where you're preparing the bacon, you're providing the bacon. The other benefit, I think you can see it in what I'll call exemplary organizations. So organizations, we think of Toyota, Apple, Nike, JP Morgan Chase in the financial services, football, Kansas City Chiefs. Clearly, these organizations exhibit level 3 and level 4 commitment from the top all the way down, right? From ownership to the board of directors, all the way down through management and to the individual contributor. And you see that because these are names and brands that have sustained themselves over a period of time. It is exceptionally difficult in the sport of football to even get to a Super Bowl, to have a chance to get to whatever they've been to, the Kansas City Chiefs, 4 or 5 in the last several years, and then win 3. I mean, the level of commitment that is required to go and achieve something that incredible. You look at a company like JP Morgan Chase, to have had such a long run of success that they've had, a Toyota, an enduring company, which now has factories all over the United States, previously all in Japan. I mean, they've just adapted their supply chain over time. These companies have greatly benefit, not just in terms of employee retention, very likely, but also in terms of stock price and investor shareholder return. So I think the proof is in the pudding. There's significant benefits not only to the organization, but also to the individual if the individual is willing to commit for some period of time. This isn't a forever commitment. I think that's the one thing I want to clear up too. The level 4 commitment, the ride or die commitment, is not something we can do forever. You think about birds. So we're changing seasons, right? We're now in the spring. And so the birds have now come up from the south, Mexico, right? And they've made their way north, right? Several hundred miles. And you know anything about formation? Well, birds do fly in formation for a long period of time. And well, they rotate. So the level 4 commitment is that bird in the front who's putting in most of the effort as they flap their wings to give a little bit of boost for those birds that are behind them. And then they rotate. And eventually those birds that were in the back kind of coasting and enjoying themselves at level 1 and level 2 commitment, they now move up to level 3 and level 4, and they take on the load for a while. And so to avoid the burnout, the birds got it figured out as well as humans do in terms of how to share the load. So commitment at that level 4 level, very difficult to sustain for a really long period of time. And I think the bird migration gives us a great visual of how to balance that within our own teams as leaders.
That is a great metaphor. I love that. I didn't know that. I've also never heard of the chicken and the pig story either. So I'm learning so much right now. Well, any closing thoughts to leave the listeners with as they either are trying to work on commitment themselves or work to gain commitment with their teams or improve their professional careers in that way?
Yeah. I would say just to close out that enduring commitment precedes significant impact and enduring results. And there is a level of commitment that has to happen in order for there to ever be a man or woman on the moon. That doesn't just happen. For a company like Tesla to have the market share that they now do is incredible. That doesn't just happen because a couple people say, okay, let's just give this a try. That may be how they start, but that's certainly not how it sustains itself. Before committing, people do ask themselves questions. And as leaders, we have to recognize that they're wondering, hey, what's in it for me? How big and how important is this? Is this a short-term deal or is this a long-term deal? As leaders, we also have to recognize that what we ask of our people, we have to be willing to give. And we have to have demonstrated that we're willing to give it before we then go and ask our people to go give it. So matching the level of commitment that we are going to deliver upon what people are going to bring is really, really important. And then we just have to remind ourselves as leaders that there's a tricky line between, gaining commitment versus manipulating people for our personal benefit and gain. And if we're doing that over time, people are going to start to notice. And that's inauthentic and the opposite of what we want to be doing as bona fide leaders. We want to help set a really compelling vision, a preferred future. We want to build great relationships with people that are mutually beneficial. And then we want to empower people by allowing them to work out the things that they're great at, that they love to do. And that builds sustaining commitment, which is what we're all about.
Amazing. Thank you, Tim. That's super, super helpful. Just learning how to be committed yourself, but also how to, like I said, gain commitment in others and your teams and keep the mission driving forward. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, we will see you next time. That's a wrap.
Sounds good. That's a wrap.
Thanks, Tim. See you.